This episode of Radcast Outdoors is brought to you by PK Lures, Bow Spider, and High Mountain Seasonings.
Fish on! Hey, Radcast is on!
Hunting, fishing, and everything in between. This is Radcast Outdoors. Here are David Merrill and Patrick Edwards.
Hello, everybody out there in Radio Land. It's good to be back. We're in the studio. You'll have to excuse Patrick. He's on a work errand at the moment, but we will miss him dearly. Hi, Patrick. See you later. No, so I'm not flying solo in the studio. You don't have to sit here and listen to me all day. But before that, I want to just thank our sponsors for sponsoring this podcast. We couldn't do it without PK Lures, High Mountain Seasoning, and Bow Spider. So thank you to those guys. Your support really does mean a lot to us. And if you're out there listening, go support those companies. They do a lot for us. So without any further ado, I have Jaden Bales in the studio. And we are going to introduce him. He's got a business degree out of University of Oregon. So he's an Oregon boy like me. And he works for the Wyoming Wildlife Federation. So welcome on the show.
Thank you for having me, man. Just while I'm thinking about it, I wanted to acknowledge that I am skipping out on my jerky making duties. They've been sitting in High Mountain Seasonings for the last 24 hours, and I was supposed to do that this evening. Then you asked me if I wanted to come over, and I was like, yeah, sure. So
well, you'll just have to burn the midnight oil and get that jerky on the smoker.
I know it, man. So yeah, that's we're making some snacks for this hunting season, and that kicks off like in just a couple days. So it's here already.
Sheep season started today. If you are in the know.
Oh man, that blows my mind. I can't believe it's here already. It's at every off season. I keep going like, oh, man, it doesn't get here fast enough. And then right about middle of July, all of a sudden, like time warp starts, and like all of a sudden it just boom hits you, and I'm like, I'm not ready.
So on that charcuterie with High Mountain Seasonings, have you tried other brands before?
Yeah, I've tried just a variety of like cheap stuff or whatever, and I just like how it's kind of a unique seasoning in a lot of ways. Like it just has really stronger flavors, and I just keep going back to it. So yeah,
it's the go-to around here for sure. We were just in Alaska and we did a few videos and podcasts, and those will be out soon. But we filled up my dad's smoker, which holds 26 sockeye salmon.
Oh, dude.
And by far, we tried 4 different brine recipes, 2 High Mountain, 1 my own, and 1 my dad's. And the gourmet fish brine from High Mountain Seasoning was head and shoulders above like family tradition smoked fish recipes. So
okay, well, I'm gonna have to tell the in-laws this. We usually smoke some trout out of the lakes here in the winter, and maybe that'll be his Christmas gift. I got to be careful, though. I don't want him to tell him, like, his brines suck, but this is better.
No. And, I mean, we're talking, I lived there, right? And I smoked a lot of fish, and a lot of people are like, man, this is good. But we pulled them out, taste tested, side by side, brine the same amount of time, smoked in the same smoker from the same fillet, right? It's the same fish, and it is better. So thank you, High Mountain Seasonings, for putting on such a great product. But well, let's jump right into it. Wyoming Wildlife Federation. What is it? Why does it exist? And why do you work there?
All right, man. So I think the first thing that I'm going to do is talk about why I'm there, because it's a lot easier to make that connection working backwards. I grew up hunting and fishing, doing all the outdoors things that all of us rural folks like to do or grew up doing with our families. And when I moved to Wyoming, I was like, man, I want to be involved with an organization that works on issues that are important to me in the whole spectrum, right? Like if it's off season, I'm either duck hunting or ice fishing in the winter, right? In the spring, I'm either fishing the runoff or I'm out spring bear hunting. And then in the fall, obviously doing all these ungulate hunting and stuff. So basically I was like, where can I get involved in conservation issues that covers the gambit of things I do in Wyoming? And that was the Wyoming Wildlife Federation. So I started volunteering like couple years ago, and then when a job position came open, I wanted to take that and move to Lander. I was in Laramie before, so I was just like, yeah, Lander's probably a little bit less windy than Laramie. So that's how I ended up here. And the Federation itself, man, it's been around since 1937. So since a lot of the major nonprofits started cropping up for hunting and angling. So it's been around working on policy, habitat, wildlife issues since then.
Wow. And so, I mean, if it's a wildlife issue, they're going to be in the know and they're going to be helping out in some facet. And is that mostly just legislative, or are there on the ground like volunteer projects as well?
So my job here is the communications guy. So I take information that all of our people on the ground are doing and try to disseminate it to folks. But we have programs that include legislative work. So Jess Johnson, she's down in Cheyenne working with legislators all session long. But then we also have this guy, his name's Sam Lockwood. He's down in Green River, and he's organizing habitat projects that people can go volunteer at and like put boots on the ground. So we kind of span the breadth. Also, like we have education director who has been putting on camps just these last couple of years. We had camps in Jackson, Lander, and Riverton this year for kids and doing kids education. So like I said, we kind of have a lot of spokes to this wheel with different people doing different parts, working within wildlife, habitat, conservation issues, and education.
Wow, I mean, that's a fingers in a lot of pots. So since you've been there, has there been any big bills that you've helped work on or projects?
You know, so when I was a volunteer, there were a bunch of bills that were pretty substantial. One of those that people will see around the state now is the license plate, the conservation plate. So Jess, in particular, led up or was part of that whole coalition of people trying to get the wildlife conservation plate passed, and that's the big mule deer buck that's on everyone's vehicles who buys it, and a portion of that, or all that sale after the first year, goes towards wildlife crossings every year. And that was a really good one that I like. And then this is last year, actually it'd be 2 years ago now. Jess, and this is when I was first a full-on staff member, Jess led up this effort to get roadkill collection legal. And that's kind of been a fun one that we've actually used now. This gal hit a deer out in front of our house, and it was 12 degrees outside, and we went and picked up this mule deer doe and then helped this gal process it after she smoked it with her car. So there's been some cool, like, especially roadway related bills in legislature that have been fun to work on these last few years.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that they're out there. I mean, I've been reading a book, and we had a guest on book's called Bringing Back the Lions.
Okay.
And there's some really cool similarities between the North American wildlife conservation model and what they're implementing in Africa and some of the changes. And so if you get time, and I mean, it's an older podcast, I'm not going to go in depth about it, but I'm about 3/4 of the way through the book called Bringing Back the Lions, and it's opened my eyes to a few things. It's very
cool.
I mean, it's cool. And one of the things I'll give you a teaser on is just the symbiotic relationship between wildlife managers, the actual hunters, and then the local people, right? Mm-hmm. And those three groups have to get along in symbiosis, right? They have to, I mean, take an elephant, for example. If an elephant is coming in every night and raiding a farmer's 2-acre cornfield that they're literally irrigating by hand and tilling by hand, that's their livelihood and their winter food. They're very quickly going to hire a poacher to come kill that elephant, who's going to remove the ivory and ship it to Asia, because if the local people aren't going to turn the poacher in because they're tired of the elephant, right? That elephant has no value to the local people other than, hey, we're going to not have our corn destroyed. And so there's this dichotomy of one animal has to die for 99 to live, right? And this is, you and I are hunters, we understand this. Yeah. But it's very blatantly put out in the book that if the anti-poaching team can get through to the local population that, hey, we're going to basically supplement whatever the elephant destroyed, we're going to replace. So don't go killing the elephant, leave the elephant alone. And then we're going to hire a professional hunter to come in and harvest one nuisance elephant, or we're going to track, relocate, collar, move, whatever. They're going to use some wildlife management tool to remedy this situation, right? But the bigger picture is the elephant gets to live and have habitat to live in. And I mean, after being in Africa, elephant are destructive. I mean, right now, Kruger National Park looks like a nuclear war zone because I don't know the exact number, but they're like 4x density on the elephants they should be. And a herd of 40 elephants goes through and breaks every tree in their way down, eats a few leaves off of it, and goes and snaps the next tree down. That's just what elephants do. So, I mean, it's got to be in balance, right? But that piece and what that in the book, they do a much better job than I can of articulating this argument. But it's as simple as winning the hearts and minds of the villagers to not hire the poacher, having an anti-poaching team that's going out and actually reprimanding, and having a government that will prosecute a poacher, right? And then having hunting concessions or ground set aside like a national park where these animals can roam freely and not get on roadways and in farmers' crops. And so there's all these multiple facets that go together to create but if you can get the balance correctly, right, then the wildlife flourish, and the local people start saying, no, you're not going to shoot our elephant because that's what brings our hunter in. And my brother works on the game concession that helps skin and butcher the elephant. And so part of it in Mozambique specifically, when they first restarted after this big civil war, these hunting concessions, they guaranteed like 50 pounds a month of meat per family. Wow. Right. So you go over, you pay $10,000 trophy fee to kill animal X, right? And you're killing 1 out of 100 because the biologist has said, and you're taking the oldest species that's no longer contributing to the gene pool anyways, right? So there's a lot of good, and I can sit there and justify the hunter's approach till I'm blue in the face. But boots on the ground, where the rubber meets the road is that meat makes it to that villager. That villager feeds his family and is no longer motivated to walk out his back door in the middle of the night and put a snare or a trap out that kills indiscriminately. But he doesn't care. He needs meat. He wants to eat food. And, so once you've satisfied all those needs and can get the government to back the wildlife, and here we don't have these issues as big, right? We do have a few guys that like to go drink beer and drive around the middle of the night with spotlight and shoot stuff. And you do that in front of me, I'm calling the game warden and the anti-poaching team. The game warden shows up and starts running license plates, and all of a sudden somebody gets their truck impounded and they go to jail. And, I don't affiliate or associate with those people. So.
Right. Well, and it's I'm so glad you brought that up, because it's like finding that symbiosis between the local community, the hunters, and like the government or the other agencies is just huge. You look at like on the east side of the state right now, where you have a little bit of a rift between some landowners, and you have a little bit of a rift between the hunters, because the landowners feel like they're getting their grass eaten out of house and home when there's 3 times as many elk in the unit than they expected or wanted to be there with the objective. And then hunters are like, well, there's not enough elk that are accessible on the public grounds that we can hunt. Like, we need to work on this access issue. And I think, like you're saying, it just comes down to people being able to work together on these things to find a wildlife management solution that makes sense for everybody. Because most of the time, it probably isn't going to make sense for 100% of the people. But if you can find common ground and get to some good solutions, like you said, in the case of the African example, it's like, look, if we can kill one that will help keep the balance in place, that is good outcome. In Wyoming, we look at this like, if you can allow a couple more people to hunt your place so that we can keep the elk off your property, like that is a success, because then you get more hunters in access to places where they wouldn't have had access otherwise.
And I've seen that example work really, really well with antelope right here in this unit that we're recording in today, right? You've got alfalfa fields everywhere. Yeah. And an antelope's going to eat, 4 or 5 pounds of alfalfa a day. And when you got 70 of them out there day in and day out. Yep. But they put some doe tags out, and the state actually mails you a list of landowners with their phone numbers to call and go get permission from. Because I don't just want to open the gate to my property here and let anybody come hunt, right? But if I'm having some depredation issues with some crop damage, yeah, because of course those antelope are going to hop the fence and go eat alfalfa instead of sagebrush. Are you going to have T-bone steaks or are you going to have dog food?
Yeah.
I mean, right?
Yeah, no doubt.
They're not stupid. So, but it works on the micro level and it does work on the macro level. And the other thing I picked up from the book here recently that was a little shocking is this one hunting concession that they're talking about in the book. Without spoiling too much more, I hope you just go read the book. But there's a premise that the reason this one is doing so good is they have some really big outside donors that are really not even hunters, right?
Okay.
And so, like you were talking about the license plate here that goes to wildlife crossings, hunting license fees are never going to be able to accommodate, because each one of those crossings is over $1 million. If you drive by and look at there's 9 or 10 or 11, there's a bunch over there in Pinedale where the deer were getting killed all the time. They've now put in the high fencing and then a bridge across the top of the freeway, right?
Yep.
I mean, each one of those is a couple $1 million project.
And they're super effective. That's the other cool part.
I think we need them, and I'm glad we have them. But without some outside funding help, right, those projects are going to get put on the back burner.
Yeah, that wildlife crossing out of Dubois that they're working on it now. If I remember right, I'm trying to recall correctly from my brain, but I saw a headline yesterday. It was like 10.1 million just for the wildlife crossings outside of Dubois, and we have.
But there's a lot of deer that get creamed on that road right there.
Oh yeah. And a lot of really nice ones. But you're so right. And bighorn sheep on that same stretch, they come down in those red rocks and they get smacked right there on the highway. And that's a great example of how what you're getting to is just that there are other mechanisms for people to get involved in this wildlife conservation outside of, and it's oftentimes really effective when people can get involved in wildlife conservation outside of just hunting dollars.
Yeah, and I mean, we could translate it to fishing, right?
Yep.
So you're buying a fishing license, you're going to your favorite reservoir, stream, whatever, but there's habitat restoration projects, there's access, there's just cleanups that need to be done that need funding and need help and need volunteers, whether it's money or dollars or labor. And that's what they're talking about in this book is they actually brought lions back, and the amount of money it costs to reintroduce lions, the license sales will never support. Right. And so but at some point in time, I want to go hear, see, and witness and experience lions. And whether that's to hunt one or not, that's kind of up to me to decide. But I'm glad people are out there now funding the conservation to make it possible for me to go harvest a lion at some point in time in my life.
Well, I think about that a lot when we talk about the grizzly bears here, right? Like originally it was like when we discussed like delisting, I think that was 2017 into 18 or 17 into 18, I think. And it was this notion that it was like, man, we are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars every year to manage these grizzly bears. It sure would be nice to bring in some revenue to try to offset the cost. It certainly wasn't going to make it a moot value.
They'll never break even.
No.
But one thing without risking being in an echo chamber is the grizzly bear should be hailed as one of the big success stories of the Endangered Species Act, period.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no grizzly bears. Let's just be honest. They weren't here. They go on the endangered species list. There's all this stuff, from the 70s till now. It should be touted as a great success story that those are going back on the state's management and being huntable population. And, I have some very strong feelings about the grizzly bears. I have some respect for them. I think they're a neat critter. But having been an Alaskan resident, when I yell at a bear in Alaska, it runs the other way.
Right.
When I yell at a bear here, and we're not talking, I'm up in the park, or we're talking I'm in my honey holes, usually wilderness. So you can pull a map out in Wyoming and figure out which wilderness I'm in. But when I yell at those bears, Jaden, they run towards me.
Yeah.
It's a 50-50, and I don't know, and it's scary.
Dude.
I mean,
It's insane. Have you had Dan Thompson on yet?
We have.
Okay, good. So you've heard this all, but just when he talks
And
about,
so for the listeners out there,
Okay.
without cutting you off, Dan Thompson is the large carnivore wildlife biologist for the state of Wyoming. So
he runs all of
awesome.
the big carnivores. He lives in Lander. But one of the things he's talked about is like, okay, like great, we have a problem bear in Cody, and we need to move that thing. Where are we going to put that bear that isn't on top of another bear's habitat? And he's like, we are like literally we are full up of what we've identified as suitable habitat for bears to put bears back in. So we can't you can't move anything around without, there's no holes left, for the population to expand to. And
So there's a famous area in Alaska. All the problem bears in Anchorage get flown over to 16B and collared and kicked out the plane, right?
okay.
You can kill 2 bears in 16B as a resident every year. But that's where all the maulings now happen with moose hunters is 16B because they have all these problem bears that are habituated to people, right?
Oh, that's
so
bad.
I'm of the opinion now we don't need to be transporting bears around. If we have a problem bear, we now have an excess population of them. And we can go all the way back to the hunt that got shut down for political reasons, not
Right.
management reasons. And that really infuriates me that I say we as the taxpayers have hired and paid Dan Thompson's salary.
Yep.
And he's gone and got a very good education and does a lot of work and knows exactly what he's talking about.
Yep.
And he says, hey, we need to pull 50 bears out of this population to curb the exponential growth that's happening.
Yep.
And then the Ninth Circuit judge on the ninth hour in the ninth inning pulls the rug out from under the whole deal and says, no, these are going to be protected. And that's where I will call out the Greenpeace organizations who are sitting here saying that they're touting protecting wildlife. They're not doing anything. No. They're actually harming, and they don't really see that one of the ramifications is Jaden, I think the state on depredation kills about 50 bears a year.
I was just about to say that. I think the other day I read it was 47 or something last year, or 64. I'm getting it. It's right around.
And the way they had Dan and the guys that set that season up, it was split between 2 units, 12 bears in each unit, so 24 bears total, and there was 1 sow mortality quotas in the 2 units. So we were going to kill 8 to 10 bears max before we hit the mortality quota and shut the seasons down.
Yeah.
Right?
And there was a whole orientation involved, and with the whole process. It was very in depth. If you were going to have one of those tags, you were in for like a serious investment of time and energy and knowledge to like even just go into the woods. I thought they did a good job. But
to hand the management back over to the feds is no different than us handing the the tax obligation back over to the British Empire. That's akin to what just happened, right? Here you have, because the Greenies sued, and they sued on 4 counts, and it got held up on 2, and one was that the Asian bark beetle was killing all the white bark pine, and the pine nuts weren't available for the bears, and so Dan Thompson and the state of Wyoming spent $1.3 million to go study, collar, and check bear poop out and check weights, and guess what they found at the end of this study? When the pine nuts aren't available, the bears utilize other food sources, and there's no threat to their body condition. They're an omnivore. I'm like, well, duh, I could have told you that. But we had to spend and prove, and I'm glad I'm not throwing stones at our game and fish. I really do think they do the best job, and they have, they get hammered from both sides, the left and the right, and they're hated on both sides. So I'm going to give them a little bit of a break on this podcast, and we can talk about it right now. I've been in other states that don't change quotas unit by unit, year by year, that don't really care about managing for the overall health of wildlife. They care about managing for the dollar, and the state is Oregon, and I'm sitting on 13 Oregon elk points, and I don't think I'll ever utilize them. And here's why. On a general over-the-counter tag in the West, right? Montana, Idaho, Colorado, Wyoming.
Yep.
I can kill a bull over 300 inches.
Yep.
I burn my 13 elk points and get maybe Emily, maybe blues, and maybe kill a 320 bull.
Yep.
No, thank you.
And you've got all the other spike hunters running around in the woods with you.
Yeah. And I have to burn a week or two of time, energy, and gas. So Oregon, they can, until they figure out that mountain lions eat elk, until they figure out that wolves eat elk and that they need managed, and I'm not going to pay more and more money for less and less opportunity. I'm sorry. You're from there, so what's your take?
Well, I just burned 12 points last year to go on a rifle hunt with my dad and my brother outside of a unit that's my brother's backyard. So we stayed at his house, and we had an enjoyable hunt. We didn't end up killing an elk because we were trying to get my brother a bull, and he hasn't gotten the bull yet. So we passed on some cows and, tried to work away. Anyway, regardless, it was a great hunt for trying to get an elk. And I spent 12 points. So it was a great time, though. I mean, and that's the whole thing. And it comes back to, like you're saying, that there is a balance that Game and Fish has to play with opportunity and quality, right? Because you can do the other model of offering all of the opportunity in the world without too much interest in the quality of the experience. But obviously, whenever you work on the quality of the experience, you sacrifice some of the opportunity. So it's like, okay, well, you just have to work on the balance of that. And that is a really hard job.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to throw stones at ODF and W too hard, other than I would have never left if the blacktail hunting was on the incline, not the decline, right? It's now down to I've hammered him so hard I don't even want to get after him more. But it's to the point now where a $700 blacktail tag, I may or may not see a deer the whole time I go hunt there for 7 days, versus I can buy a $350 deer tag in Colorado, Idaho, Montana, draw whatever, but a mule deer tag is $350, and I can go kill a $160 on a over-the-counter kind of general public land opening week hunt, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Versus go buy the blacktail tag, and I mean, Jaden, if I could go hunt blacktail every year, I grew up doing it, and until you've done it and been successful at it, there's very few things. I mean, you're hunting a critter that's borderline nocturnal 11 months of the year. They're like a ghost.
Yeah.
And you get a foggy, misting morning, and you're in old growth timber patch, and all of a sudden here, this chocolate little like marshmallow thing appears and starts floating towards you because they're just silent as all get out, right? Your heart gets thumping pretty good.
Oh, that's sweet. Yeah, like I was telling you before, I grew up on the mule deer side of the state, so I didn't have that experience, and I still got to do it at some point. Maybe that's what my big pile of points goes towards eventually.
It's a really good. I'm threatening every year, but it's again the model in Oregon is managed for dollars, not managed for wildlife.
Right.
And so every time I've turned around, they've increased. Resident elk tags now $55. It was $30 not 2 decades ago. Now I'm fine with them getting a little more money and putting a little more burden on the resident hunter than the non-resident hunter. And we'll get into it right now. I think it's folly that Wyoming is going to do the 90-10 rule from the 80-20. I'm opposed to that.
For the big five.
Yeah, I'm opposed to it.
Okay. I just wanted to, one thing I was going to comment on, because I think that it is a really cool case study to try to show some balance, or not balance, some contrast. In Oregon, though, like they have 5% non-resident allocation for deer and elk and 3% for pronghorn. If they really wanted to make more money, they would increase the non-resident tags that are $600 a pop. I don't know. I just paid something like that last year. So I do think that, and I think you're right, is they've they're trying to play this game of like, what does the general public want for hunting opportunity, and how can they try to run that agency in some way. And Oregon's just a totally different state with how they fund that thing. 60% of it goes to fish, not the game on the ground, so.
Well, I know that predators need to be managed, and creating a predator pit with intact wolves and grizzly, and not grizzly bears, black bears and mountain lions, they by their own numbers have set that their quota, their limit for mountain lions is 4,000, and they're at 9,000 cats the last time I checked, and that's an estimation. They're probably at 10 or 11,000 cats, and they want to have 4.
Yeah.
Same thing, sea lions and fishermen, right? And I've had this argument with a few people before, right? Big fishermen are like, man, we need to kill every sea lion out there and we got to get rid of them. And I'm like, well, what about us elk hunters? We feel the same about wolves. Oh, that's different. I'm like, no, actually, a sea lion is a water wolf, and yeah, salmon is an elk in that ecosystem.
One of the things I think Wyoming has done a good job of when I look at this whole predator conversation is with wolves. When you talk about the pendulum swings that have happened in other states, and what it looks like politically, I'm not even talking about what it looks like for wolves on the ground, but like the political backlash that comes from the things that Montana and Idaho have changed in the last year, 18 months or whatever it was. Then you look at Wyoming over here that we're just like kind of twiddling our fingers like,
but don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain.
Yeah, don't look at us. We're doing it pretty good, honestly, because with our predator zone, man, we've identified this area where we're like, we need to be very selective about our wolf harvest, and this it's basically the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, and have a quota system with tags and whatever. But outside of that, we're going to say, socially, it's not quite as acceptable. We want to keep those wolf numbers down and basically just have like a predator designation, just like a coyote. And I think, just like looking across the West, I think that way of managing has been the best for all groups involved that anyone has come up with yet. So that's my take on, at least with
hats
that.
off, kudos to whoever came up with the predator zone versus the trophy management zone. It's a good buffer around the park, and the park can do what they want with their wolves. And the
only wolf I've seen so far was in the dang trophy zone, and I just hunting outside of in the predator zone most of the time. I didn't think about buying a tag, and then I was up in the trophy zone, and there, sure enough, saw one, and I was like, oh, dang it, I'm gonna have to go back with a tag this year.
So you got to see my wife's moose, and we were up scout hunting. So it was season, and she was hunting one meadow with her dad, and I took my buddy, and we're like spotting other meadows and wallows at her, those big willow flat meadows.
Yeah.
And we'd hiked in, I don't know, 2.5 miles, and we're sitting there, and two wolves howl. And I'm sitting there with my rifle with a wolf tag in my pocket, and I'm howling back and forth at those things. And there was an island of timber in the middle of this willow meadow. It was 50 yards wide and 100 yards long, and there's a wolf upstream of it in a big patch of timber howling at the wolf that's in the middle, and they're howling back and forth, and I'm howling, and he would not come out. He was in that patch, and they finally shut up and went somewhere else. I never got to see him, but we're talking 190, 200 yards, and we just walked up to the edge and just sitting there. I'm like, hey, let's just... And they howled first. I didn't, and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to get my wolf, and I'm getting excited. And so, yes, that's still, there isn't a wolf out there in the trophy room yet, and that's going to happen.
Those critters are so dang smart, man. I think right now on my to-do list in the winter is still, I got to get a cat. And I've been chasing them down. I like to, just because I don't have dogs, I haven't built access to dogs. I've been tracking and trying to call them, and I've seen 3 cats this last year, 12 months. So I think it's going to happen this year.
I've seen 3 cats in my life, and one of them's on my wall, and the other one should be.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if it's super lucky or unlucky, whatever you want to put it. But I think I'm getting close. I'm honing in. I might connect I will connect this next winter. But after that, then it's the challenge of the wolves. And I know, especially in my neck of the woods, like there's a couple of really diehard people, snowmobiles, they're out all the time, they're tracking, they're trying to figure out, and it's like they can spend all winter long. They might cut some tracks, but they like still have a hard time ever seeing them. They're just so fast across that snow, and they're so smart to the sound of a machine, that like they just gone. So I think that's a whole nother challenge when you're talking about hunting, because it's like a tough task to do. I think getting a wolf is very tough.
I tried. I actually put traps on the ground in Alaska and tried. And even I was between Ski Lac and Tustamina Lake, had a snow machine, put up about 25 snares, and I'd go out, get on their trail, on their tracks, right? And hang snares, and then snow levels would adjust. So you got to adjust them up and down. But the wolves had kind of like a 2-week circle. They'd go hang around Tustamina, and then they'd circle up the north, hang around Ski Lac, and then come back through. And that was that pack's pattern. Well, they'd come through once every 2 weeks, right?
Oh.
And they'd always come through 200 or 300 yards away from where they came through the last time. And so I'm just sitting here nuking this one like bottleneck funnel, and I never did get my wolf.
That's funny. Well, and that, I wonder, I don't know if you can say like they're doing this super intentionally. They smell your scent or whatever the case is, but regardless, whatever their instinct is to not go through that same point, that is impressive to me. I think that, they're just a cool freaking critter. So to figure them out, I think is like you're saying, it's just it's hard. It takes dedication.
Well, I can tell that your passion for wildlife and, your enjoyment of work kind of go to hand in hand, right? Yeah. You're like, on the weekend, you're hunting, chasing, doing something, and then during the week, you're working to some facet to help improve wildlife. So, thanks for that piece of that, right? I can see that.
Well, and we're talking over here about some of the issues that we see with wildlife management from the state's perspective. And one of the things, like I think originally that I wanted to do is get involved in a way that was above and beyond what you just see the state doing. And because I think that, for whatever reason, I don't want to rag on them too much. There are natural constraints to do that work, right? But WWF can go out here, work with the landowner, figure out with the BLM, like what this fence is built for. God, this thing is laying all over. Actually, we just removed an 8-foot tall elk fence that was built in like the 50s last weekend outside of Du Bois. And it's like a half mile, well, it was 0.6 miles worth of this 8-foot tall fence that was built for elk that's just now out in the middle of public land.
An elk catch fence?
Yeah. And so, so anyway, we went out and ripped it down, and we work with all these different agencies, but
I hope it's not my elk catch fence, because there's one that I really like to. It's a really good funnel. The elk have to. They have to come. They can't go through it, right?
Well, if it is, you should tell me. But
yeah, we'll see. When I go up there this fall, I'll be like, "Where'd my elk fence go?"
They said it was real hard to get to. I was gone that weekend, yeah, they said it was real hard to get to, and just a bear, and that's why I hadn't been pulled out yet. But the moral of that story was just being like, when the general public says like, "Hey, we want to make a difference," there's like avenues to just go freaking make a difference. You don't have to sit back and wait for somebody else to do it. And that's why
pass a piece of legislation and get approval and get it rubber stamped, and then go out, and now it's just like, hey, that fence needs removed and we need access. And yeah, sure, I'll let you guys go tear that down. But those old timers knew a thing or two, because they put that elk fence in a place that I find elk.
That's funny. Well, I know this one used to be like they had the Game and Fish purchased an old ranch, and I think the old ranch put that fence up for hay fields. And then so when there was no hayfield left, like there's no purpose for it. But regardless, so that was you're exactly right.
I just think mine was an old catch pen for some reason, but maybe it's not. It kind of looks the one I hunt by has kind of low fencing to like a catch pen with a gate, but maybe it's just a hay. But there's no hay fields around it, so
yours will still be there then.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. So if you had to pick one species, one weapon to hunt forever, what would it be and why?
Mule deer with a bow, because I don't know why, but they've just caught my attention, man. So I do a lot of side projects. You were just commenting on how like my work is my passion, and yes, but you also have to sacrifice pay usually to do that.
So I worked as a guide for an outfitter for a number of years, and yes, you sacrifice a lot of pay. If anybody's out there listening, they're going to go start guiding for an outfitter, don't calculate your per hour rate. Don't do that. You'll be very frustrated.
Yeah. So one of these side projects that I do and have done for a while is a mule deer podcast with my friend Cody Rich.
What's it called?
It's literally just called Muley Monday with the Rich Outdoors podcast.
Love it. I'll have to check it out.
Well, I would appreciate that. That'd be great. But so it just, for whatever reason, a handful of years ago, I just decided like, man, let me back this up even further. Actually, this is a pretty good story. When I couldn't draw the local deer tag anymore, the local rifle deer tag anymore, I picked up a bow. And I was like, okay, like I got to hunt deer every year, the first year I went out, there was a buck bedded underneath this cliff edge in the sagebrush. I walked up and shot him at 18 yards. And I was like, this is pretty easy.
I've been wanting to do that my whole life.
It took me 7 more years to replicate it, but like we'll just breeze over that part. So I got this deer, and then I go, man, I'd like to get an elk. And then it took me 4 or 5 years of stumbling around in the elk woods. And I was not having success. And then I was listening to this podcast called The Rich Outdoors, and I go, Cody, like I'd love to help you out in the podcast or whatever if you teach me how to kill an elk. And so this one season I dedicated all to hunting elk, but every day I went out elk hunting and I'd see a deer. I'd be like, oh, I should go chase that. And I should go chase that. And so I eventually did get an elk that year. But I think after doing that, I realized like, I just really want to chase deer while I'm elk hunting. So that's led to that obsession of just figuring them out. And we do a lot of biology podcasts and try to figure out, looking into the myriad of issues that face the mule deer populations. Some places they're doing pretty good. Some places they're not. Some places they're just seesawing back and forth, and it's hard to say.
Which is crazy because, I mean, elk in the West,
they're just going up.
I'm not going to sit here and speculate on why, what, where, but, as a Oregon bow hunter, and why did I pick up a bow? Because, well, you just couldn't get a rifle tag. And there's there's an interesting trend I see there of guys that got successful in Oregon bow hunting are like abandoning the state and they're moving to other states and they're just killers. They are absolutely, I mean, I don't know if it's, well, I mean, part of it is you go from a unit that's 3 or 6%, you drop us at a unit that's 30 or 60 or 20% success. Like, what? I actually have a chance this year?
Yeah.
You're telling me there's a chance?
Yeah. That's so the case, man. Man, and I just love the fact that like we have, like, regardless of how they're doing, we have a lot of critters on the landscape. They could be better. Don't get me wrong. In a lot of cases. But like you said, there's a lot of opportunity.
But there's a lot of organizations that are doing some really good work into what the mule deer need. And I mean, just that migration study they've done right here in this state blew my mind as far as how far those mule deer really do travel and how close those migratory mule deer travel to this. And we had one of the earlier podcasts, you can go check it out. We had one of the biologists on talking about the mule deer study, but she gave a report at the Bowhunter and Wyoming Convention. And it's one of the earlier podcasts. I don't have it here in front of me. So you just go listen to all the earlier Radcast podcasts and you'll find it.
There you go.
But on the mule deer front, one of the does they had collared had a fawn. The next year, that fawn had her fawn, so her granddaughter, like 300 yards away from her, and they used the exact same path migrating back and forth. And even after the grandma died, the daughter and granddaughter deer still started using a very, very similar migration path. It's like ingrained, almost like salmon. And that I've always, because like you, I just wandered around. Oh, there's a deer. I guess deer just randomly wander around because elk kind of have a methodical, this is the trail, this is the saddle, this is where we're going. I just kind of thought deer were just, I just thought they were like coyotes, right? It was, there's a coyote, there's a deer. It's just, I didn't have any idea, any clue. I was just naive. But
well, and that's like, I think one of my favorite things, and probably why I'm more of a deer hunter, and here's another reason, I guess, is because my hunting season started in June because I could start scouting. And then I'm going to go roll into September 1, having a whole host of different deer that I found in different drainages. And I just have to choose, should I go chase that? Oh, dude, I found this giant fork and horn yesterday, side note. And I think I might try to chase him. Anyway, should I go chase that giant fork and horn I found?
Heavy?
Oh, yeah. I'll show you a picture after this. He's cool.
So we're not talking, guys. We're not. I've seen a couple of these before in the past. We'll have to check out the picture. But we're not talking like a 1.5 year old, like, spike with forks. We're talking like a regressed, like 9-10 year old, basically like a 4-point mainframe muley with all the other points missing and just mass. And they are cool deer.
They're so cool. And I haven't got one yet. So, that goes back to the point of like, you can go and kind of figure out like, oh man, that's a cool buck. That's a cool buck. That's a cool buck. That's the biggest buck I've found. Am I going to chase him all archery season or not? And then you can go back, and when it hits hunting season, you hit the ground rolling and you're just in critters the whole time. And I really like that. I think it kind of adds days to the season for me mentally. But
I
just
would
like you're
feel
talking
that
about.
way about antelope, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You were just talking about that before the podcast, man. You go find a buck and then you sit that, like, you can pattern that sucker and
You
go
can
find it.
pattern a buck, and there's two types of nuclei, I'll call them, that I've noticed. When water's pretty pleasurable, there's a lot of it, a buck is going to defend a harem, and that harem and that buck are going to use one water hole, right? And if within like 10 acres or maybe 100 acres, or they have a set little poo pile, if another buck wanders in there, that buck is going to tear off across the next mile and have to chase him out, right? But when water kind of dissipates and disappears, and more of those natural water holes disappear, and they're now using like a tank trough, the bucks can no longer defend the whole trough and the whole area around it, right? They're just wasting energy. So then they abandon territory, and they start just defending their little harem.
Yeah. That's so cool. I think pronghorn, they're our WWF's logo, and I think they're super underrated. The other thing is just being in Wyoming, man, we have more pronghorn in this state than most of the other states combined.
So in Alaska, Dall sheep is the best table fare, and there's no argument. It is the best table fare.
I haven't had Dall sheep, so we'll have to remedy that sometime.
We can work on that. I'll bring you some mountain goat home this time, but maybe next time. There is some stuff going on up there. If we can get into it a little bit, but I'm not happy about it. However, back to I haven't had sheep here in Wyoming yet, but of the species I have had, antelope is the best table fare.
You can do anything with it. I love it. It's so good.
I've cooked antelope backstrap next to, hayfield, alfalfa field, cow elk backstrap, and the antelope's better.
I agree. The only downside is you don't get very much off of one.
Yep. But charcuterie, we make some snack sticks, and then backstrap is always slow cooked on the smoker, and it's so good.
Jess, she made me, she's made a lot of people this, but tartare, have you had tartare? She made some wild sheep tartare a couple years ago, and I will say, if you want to just know what a thing tastes like, that's a pretty good way to do it. It was good. It was really good. Yeah, I don't know. I still don't think it beats pronghorn tartare, but it was good.
So we'll have our little high mountain seasoning moment here, our spot.
Okay.
If you had to procure one animal, one recipe, what is it going to be, and how are you cooking it?
Oh, I was just raving about mule deer, but it will be a pronghorn, and it is literally just taking a backstrap, slapping some good seasoning on it, putting it on a hot cast iron, making sure it crisps up on each side, maybe with a little butter, slap that sucker in the oven to finish it off, and then pull it out medium rare.
Okay.
Slice it thin.
A little bit of broccoli on the side?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, I can come over for dinner now.
That makes me hungry just thinking about it.
Just make sure you put some High Mountain seasoning on there.
That's right.
So, thank you, Hans and High Mountain Seasoning, for sponsoring the podcast. And we really do. I've had listeners, you guys really like that stuff? You really use that stuff? I would use it if they didn't sponsor us. I used it before the podcast, and I'll continue using it afterwards because it is that good.
Well, that's what I'm saying, man. That's the one seasoning I buy for all my game meat. So, and I'm not sponsored by them. So
there we go. Take Jaden's word for it. So to get into Alaska, and we won't delve too deep, but basically they shut down parts of 26 and 24 to Dall sheep trophy hunting, but they're going to leave the subsistence use hunting open. And my issue with that is, from a management objective standpoint, if the sheep numbers warrant restricting hunting,
right,
we shouldn't be leaving the subsistence use where they can kill any sheep and be closing the 8-year ramp. Because I don't care what you say, the trophy hunters that are going up there paying $26,000, $27,000, even $30,000 to go on a Dall sheep hunt, or if you go watch my film on our YouTube channel, we hiked in one of those units and did a DIY over-the-counter Dall sheep hunt, right? Now, I have some connections, and in the film, you'll see how and where and what and why, but we harvested an 8.5-year-old ram. Actually, it's 9.5-year-old ram. My ram that I harvested a couple years prior is 8.5-year-old, right? Mm-hmm. Those rams are pretty much done contributing to the genetic gene pool. Mm-hmm. They're off by themselves. They're bachelor rams. The sheep, if we removed every 8.5-year-old ram on the whole mountain could snap our fingers. The sheep population is going to grow next year because those rams reach maturity at 2.5, and the 4 to 6 year olds are doing a majority of the breeding, right?
Yep.
They start getting to that older age, and they don't have the body conditioning, the stamina, and everything else to fight off the younger rams. I mean, it's science. It's proven. I'm not going to get into it any further, but as a hunter who would contribute to conservation, I'm okay if they shut the whole thing down, right? If they're like, hey,
Yeah.
That's not my gripe.
But if the Game and Fish and if their surveys suggest that there's a scientific-based reason to shut them down too.
Yes. However, you can't leave subsistence hunting open where they get 6 months to hunt them. They can hunt them from snowmobiles, and they just wait till the snow flies, run up a hill, and chase them around and shoot them from the machines. And you can't tell me that they don't. And somebody's going to scream and yell, but there's subsistence use hunters do, on some level, abuse compared to the guys that are backpacking in 50, 60, 70 miles, sitting there watching sheep, picking a sheep out, and waiting for the opportune moment to go out and harvest one. And if that guy doesn't find that 8-year-old legal full coral ram, he goes home without one.
Yep.
If you go out subsistence and you don't come out home with one, you're I'm not going to eat. Well, my issue with that is there's 150 pounds of meat on a sheep. I really don't think we should be using sheep as subsistence. But I'm a huge sheep hunting nut and fan. So take all that with a grain of salt. But I'm not happy with the feds shutting down Alaska.
Well, it goes back to like the way that our model has worked since we identified a problem in the early 1900s was if we have hunting seasons, you can take the males because you can have a very low population of males on the landscape and still continue to grow the herd. For deer, for example, that's in the single digits, 8, 9, maybe, you'll see if you have bad conditions, you want $10 per 100 does on the landscape. And you can still grow populations with that.
You can
Everything's
still grow
getting
with 10 to 100.
Yeah. And then I don't know what the sheep situation is off the top of my head. I just know that the deer is an example. And we've been able to hunt this entire, last century because we can take the males and the population still grows. Like there can still continue to be an element of conservation while that happens.
And this works across. What's really cool about our model is it works across all facets. And all you need to go is go research bison, go research elk, go research white-tailed deer, go research turkeys. You go look at the history of those 4 species in particular. They're all success stories. They're all bison were almost gone, elk were almost gone, white-tailed deer were diminished, turkeys were almost gone, right? And then
Pronghorn.
Pronghorn, another one. But you look at the numbers, and it's staggering. I mean, there's more white-tailed deer now than ever.
Right.
I mean, back east, people are hitting multiple a year with their car during the rut, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a whole thing. And they're expanding a bunch in Wyoming,
Why do whitetail have such a bad rap here in Wyoming?
I don't know, dude. I've got 3 tags in my pocket this year, and I love eating them. So I'm going to try to I haven't got a buck with my bow yet, and so that's kind of on the game plan.
I've tried, but I put in for doe tags all the time, and I actually kind of specifically target the whitetail because I think they're better to eat than the mule deer doe. And if you think I'm wrong, well, okay, well, I'm not.
And there's not a lot of, and that's the other thing is there's not a lot of doe mule deer hunting because we've identified places that, in the majority of places, that mule deer populations need to grow. So we don't have the subsistence hunting of hunting females.
And that is a beautiful part of this whole system, So I will. It might be a little bit of blasphemy, but I am going to go on a mule deer hunt this year. And I've answered the same question. I'm archery elk all the way. Right. That's with a bow with an elk. I'm not skipping.
Not skipping a single day in September.
I did when I lived in Alaska for several years, and that's why I moved here to specifically kill elk. So,
dude. But there's, and I'm going to be devil's advocate for myself. There's something amazing about a bull bugling sub 100 yards away, and you feel that thing resonating in your chest.
You feel it in your toes. It curls your nails, and you just it takes a pretty good.
I've got goosebumps just thinking about it.
Oh, we're turning very close here to September, and it's time. The mountains are calling, and I must go. In fact, I leave in a few days for Kodiak, but I am gonna, when I get done with Kodiak, go do some elks because it's September. Have to do that. I have a Montana tag and a Wyoming tag in my pocket
For elk?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. So
nice.
I'm going to see if I can get 2 on the ground, and the freezers are going to be full.
Are you going to Montana later? Because
I'm going to go early.
Oh, really?
Because we have, we don't, the some of the units I like to hunt here don't open until mid-month.
Oh.
And that opens the beginning of the month. So I've never really hunted Wyoming very hard that first 2 weeks yet, but I will someday. So I'm going to head up there first.
Okay.
And then come down here. But I'm going to run over to do a rifle mule deer hunt right before it closes. And so I don't want to tell which unit that one is either. But
in which state?
This state.
Oh, okay. I just was curious.
But I haven't yet committed to spot and stalk mule deer with a bow. It's high on my list, but I keep reverting to just give me the rifle and let's go find a bit, because I can't call that sucker in. You're not calling him in, right? You're not rattling him in, and you're really not chasing him down. You got to spot him.
Yep.
You got to wait till he's bedded. Yep. And then you got to move in on him, and half the time you get there and he's not there anymore. That's madness.
It is. You are correct. It is a little bit of madness. That buck I got last year, it was like the classic. I actually had buddies with me that they were able to hand signal me in, and I sat above that sucker from noon till 4:54 when he stood up, and eventually, obviously, got him. And but it is like, okay, 4 hours and 54 minutes of just sitting in this baking sun waiting for that thing to stand up. It was a little bit of madness.
So one of those mule deer you saw hanging up there in the trophy room, we spotted at daylight at 6:25. He went to bed at 6:27.
Okay.
At 9 a.m., we decided that he wasn't coming out of those trees because the sun was up. It was hot. It was 2.5 miles hike through mountains, not just plain. He was a high alpine buck. So we had to go basically over and down a ridge, through a basin, and then up.
Oh.
Got to where he was about 2:30 in the afternoon and sat there till 6:30. No deer. Got up and started creeping through the 150 yards of timber. Still no deer. Demoralized, turned around and walked out of there. Got about 250 yards away. He'd snuck out of there and got above us. And he's on the wall, so I obviously got him. He's a beautiful buck. It was a 220-yard shot, but the wind was blowing and a little bit of a thunderstorm came in. I put every stitch of clothes I had on. So while you're sitting there sweating for your 4 hours on your buck, there was another guy on the other part of the state that was sitting there freezing. I was absolutely teeth chattering, rifles on my pack right in front of me. I'm like 120 yards from this whole patch of timber. Like, he's just got to stand up and take 3 steps and he's dead. What he must have done is between 9 and 2 when we were stalking towards him, he was obviously in the sun a little bit or got hot, and he just must have moved 150 yards down drainage into a thicker cover. And then when he got up to feed, he just fed straight up that drainage. So he basically went to my left and then turned and fed right up past me while I was sitting there. And I hiked up to the ridge to hike back out. And I'm like, hey. And I wasn't 100% sure because it was still legal light, but it was 10 minutes away. And I was like, there's a big deer. He's looking at me at 220. I'm shooting him. I don't know if it's my deer or not. And it ended up being the same deer. We were only 200-300 yards away, but
that's cool, man.
They are sneaky.
I have a friend of mine who grew up down in Evanston who loves hunting mule deer. And he told me this story when he was in high school, or maybe just out of high school. He'd gone back home for hunting season. And they were out there glassing the big, bitter brush, sagebrushy, like rolly country with aspen, strips of aspen in it. And he was sitting up in the head of this big basin, and there were these hunters that are pushing the aspen stand. And he sees this buck get out the bottom of the aspen stand, walk out about 50 yards and lay down in the sagebrush. And the hunters walked right by him. And as that deer got closer, this is a secondhand story, and it's a good one because I want to believe it. But that buck just lays his head down in the sagebrush, and they walked right by him. And they never saw him. He eventually saw that buck the next day, and I think he said he got it. It was like a nice, older buck, but they can outsmart people so quick.
Oh, I've seen that same thing glassing from that same spot. We're going back there this year, and I'm going to take llamas instead of my horses because it's that extreme of terrain. But there was a big rock, and I watched some deer above Alpine Basin feeding, like 3 of them, and mid-morning they fed over to the edge, and there's the last 3 trees, pine trees. And they went and just kind of, I couldn't see exactly where they went into those trees, but just a row of trees, right? Mm-hmm. 80 or 100 yards above them is a big, big rock. And I'm like, if I was over there on that ridge, it was a mile and a half away or so. I'm like, I'd stand on that big rock and just look under that tree and shoot him. Not 25 minutes later, 2 orange dots appear on that rock. They're standing there. They stood there for about 15, 20 minutes. and then they left.
Oh, no.
Not knowing that 70 yards down the hill was a potential shooter. I mean, 160, 170.
A nice deer, yeah.
A nice deer, you know. So we spent several days glassing to find that one and then got him. I mean, we went for 5 days and we killed him the evening of day 4, and we only had half a day on day 5 to hunt.
Yeah, hunt the morning, then you go out, right?
We took pictures 3.5 miles. My buddy took half the deer. I took the other half the deer. We ended up back at the main wall tent at we dropped the deer in the creek and hiked up because we hiked too far down back up to the tent. But we'd found a little side road. So I grabbed the quad at 3:30 from the wall tent, drove down and got the deer, made it back to the wall tent at 4:40 in the morning. Been up since 6 a.m. the day before, or 5 a.m. the day before, right?
Yeah.
So we're going on 23 hours now. And then we had to still hike back up to the top to go get our tents the next morning in our camp. And we broke it all down and got out of there. But we had some good bacon at the wall tent, so it made it all worth it.
I feel like that is the quintessential hard hunt, good ending, great story. Like, I swear my favorite hunts have always ended like that. My black bear I got last year, we were back at the truck at 2:30, home at 3:30, you know, kind of thing. And it was just like, these are the ones that you remember for sure.
And so when people come by and see, you know, all these quote unquote, I don't want to say the word, I call them totems. When you come by my trophy room and see the totems that are on the wall, they're to remember, they're memorabilia of one of the hardest things I've done in my life, right?
Yep.
And then when I take one of those packages of meat out of the freezer and prepare a dinner with you and cook that nice broccoli, and we have, we break bread over that, that's extra special to me, because I had blood, sweat, and tears of days and days and days. You know, if we were just having a hot dog or a hamburger or even a beef I slaughtered in the backyard, big deal.
Right.
A deer that I spent 5 days looking at the deer going, not that one. No, not that one. Yeah, maybe, but he's a little far, and we'll watch him for a day, right? And then all of a sudden, oh no, we're going now. There was no question.
Yep.
And we saw that deer from 6:25 to 6:27. He went, he just appeared, was heading towards his bed. He gave us one look where he did that quintessential look all the way back over him and looked behind him.
Just enough for you to be like, yep.
Yep. I mean, when he's walking away, I remember the guy that actually spotted him, and I'll discuss how in a second, but he switched from his binos to his spotter, and I was just getting the spotter set up, and he said, I'll never forget, he goes, ooh, he might be something special. Well, he is. He's 29 5/8 wide.
I was wondering. He's wide.
So I have a goal, Jaden, to break 200 and to break 30 inches. And this hunt that we're going on this year is, I'm 100% prepared to come home without a deer if it doesn't fit the bill. So I could do it with one deer easily.
That'd
right?
be sweet.
But I may shoot another 180. Eddie may be 29 7/8 wide. I mean, that 30-inch number is just, I don't know why I want to do it, but
I call those deer, though. When you see them, though, you're just like, that is a wide load. You know,
wide load.
That is a wide load.
I like it.
That's a good way to judge it.
So and I now have some too. I bought some Maven 18 by 56.
Oh, nice. Those are good glass.
Put those on the tripod, and then I've got the spotter there, but I rarely use the spotter, right? I'm just spotting with those binos, and once I finally find a critter, then I go to the spotter to judge him, right? And especially those kind of distances. Are we going to commit to a 5-hour stalk on a deer that may or may not, right?
Yeah.
But I was trying to just span with my spotter while he had a pair of, I think, Swaros 15 power on tripod with his spotter right next to him, right?
That's a good setup.
I've gone to that for like even javelina, coos deer. Binos go on the tripod, and if you only have 10s, it'll work, but I had my 10s with me, and at 2.5 miles I couldn't even spot the deer, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, and so now I've got one eye on the spotter trying to look at spot, and you just can't fluidly pan and glass efficiently through a spotter. Now, if you're going to look further distance, you can sit there and kind of pick some country apart, but you're just quicker and more efficient to put a big glass on tripods. So that's how we found that deer, and I am super excited to try and go do it again. And my hat's off to you, because right now to hike up, just the hike up there is, we're pushing 12,000+ feet. So it's brutal. And then to put my bow on and be like, okay, I'm going to try and attempt this with my bow. I'm going to fail a stock. And I'm I'm not to your level yet. I think I want to start with a sagebrush buck in like some rimrock country that I can, watch go bed and have somebody guide me in on. I want to start that way with my bow. That sounds exciting. Where I go right now, maybe.
I did a 9-day trip in that. I would assume it's a similar kind of country that you're talking about. A couple years ago, I was like, it was more of a test of mettle more than anything. I was like, can I do 9 days by myself? Right. But I think the most demoralizing thing is when you go on a stalk and then you blow it, and then you have to go back to your camp, drop 1,000 feet, gain 1,200 feet, and like stop and grab 20 pounds of water in the bottom while you're doing it, and the whole time you're just like kicking dirt as you're frustrated about what just happened. It is so hard mentally.
But there is a nugget of why we do this, right?
Yeah.
Because if it was just about protein procurement, right?
There's a lot of easier ways to do this.
There's way easier ways. I got 5 horses standing here in the place that we could sell all of them and put 5 cows in their place, and I'd have all the protein I ever need, right?
That's right.
And those horses just exist to pack me and the elk around. So, but that touches on, this isn't just a pastime for you, right? This isn't just a hobby. This is Monday through Friday at work. This is every weekend. This is what you do for come on a podcast and talk about why you do this, right?
Yeah, and I just had a friend over last night who he's got the elk bug and he's getting into deer hunting too, and him and I were talking about like at some level, and I'm sure it happens with every facet of these outdoor pursuits, but like at some level, you get so laser focused about trying to learn and know and gain knowledge and experience every facet that you can. And I think that is probably more fun in my, I'm going to outright say, I think that is more fun than just ending up with a critter on the wall. Cause you could shell out some money and get the end result pretty quickly. But being able to go through and do the whole process, you're learning everything A to Z, whether it's the woodsmanship skills or the biology or the stalking and the shooting, and whether it's rifle or archery, it doesn't really matter. When you go deep into it and get into the process, dude, that's where that obsession kicks in. And I think that's my favorite part.
So, and I've said that to mirror that comment. I've said it the same way. I do the exact same thing that a wilderness backpacker, hiker, high adventurous does. I go to those same places. I take that same selfie on the peak, and then I turn around and go, okay, how do the animals utilize this landscape? Where are they? How can I get? And then I start diving off the trail that most people, where the elk are or not. If you're afraid to get off the trail in Wyoming, you'll still kill an elk. If you're afraid to get off the trail in Oregon, good luck, right? You might, like you did, the first deer hunt, you go out in the first 15 minutes, spot a buck 18 yards away, creep over the rim rock and shoot him, and then spend 7 years trying to duplicate that.
Let me also clarify, that was definitely on the neighbor ranch's property. It was private ground. So,
yes.
There's a lot of factors here.
There is a difference between public and private ground, and I mean, I'm thankful we have our conservation model intact. And is it perfect? No. Are we? The Wyoming Wildlife Federation is obviously working to perfect it all the time, and we're never gonna always achieve 5 stars, but let's aim for 5 stars and get 3 stars, right?
Heck yeah.
And I mean, there's a component, and this comes from my 2 trips to Africa. Having it legal to sell bushmeat is what they call it. Mm-hmm. And, there's the couple native languages, the word for animal and the word for meat is the same word, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Animal is meat. Meat is animal. It's like, hey, I got meat. I got an animal. Oh, you got dinner. Okay. It doesn't matter if deer, elk, trophy. No, they don't have those words. Oh, you got meat. What kind of meat is it? It's meat.
It's meat.
What do we have for dinner? Meat. But the same thing I've seen here is I went and did some shed hunting with the boys just for fun, and got a little demoralized that there's some guys using snowmobiles to run on the open public part of the ground. And I was trying to shed hunt some of the closure areas after they'd open, right? But some of those non-human presence areas from, December to May.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was trying to shed hunt there, and I heard one guy had picked up like $16,000 worth of sheds on his snowmobile, and I'm like, part of me, it goes against the wildlife conservation model to be able to sell sheds, right? And you can sit there and say, well, it's not damaging the animal, it's a renewable resource, but why do we have those closures? To keep that pressure off those late spring cow elk that are in their weakest body condition. That, you know, if you're pushing that herd with a snowmobile, you're basically killing all those calves, right? If you're not killing the cows, they're going to abort that calf.
Yeah,
just
if you're not killing
it.
this year's alive calf,
You're potentially threatening next year. So
yeah.
I'd rather kill an elk every September than pick up the biggest sheds every April. So, you know, I'm outspoken. I mean, I know I'm on the fence a little bit, but I see a similarity between the bushmeat issue in Africa that I brought up. Is when a guy's tight on cash, he goes out behind his house and shoots a deer and puts it on the side of the road and sells bushmeat or dries it, right? And you couldn't legally get away with that here. And that's why I tolerate the 3 mule deer does that hop in my back fence and eat my grass, right?
Mm-hmm.
Great, perfect. They're the public's property. And while they're causing some damage to my private landowner right status, I can't just go destroy that animal, right? So there's kind of a similarity there. I think I've painted a close picture of, you know, I think shed hunting's great. I think elk antler chandeliers are awesome. I think that money goes into conservation one way or another. But, you know, there's some abuse there on another aspect that I've seen that I'm not. And my other side, I'd love to pick up a shed with my 3-year-old and my 9-year-old kid, right? And we're not going to hike in the horrible grizzly bear infested areas. So we're kind of we're scratching the surface. And so
yeah,
I'm going to stick them on a horse and go some places that maybe some people can't get to.
Well, it's, Jess is, so if folks didn't know already or pick this up, Jess is also my significant other. If Jess's mom is out just going for a stroll in the hills, she's in her upper 60s. I want her to be able to pick up a deer antler and be like, man, this is really cool. This is a great thing to find, you know? And I still want that to be a common thing without it just being like a big deal that
a foot race and a monetary, and this is how I'm going to make my living. And
yeah,
so
exactly.
I get there's a balance there, and I don't think that we should get to where, you know, maybe someday I have a big pile of massive elk antlers. I've got a little stash in the shed of ones I've picked up hunting or whatever, sometimes some skull caps, and you know, someday I may want to be like, here, you know, I'm going to liquidate these antlers, and they're worth something, and I don't want them anymore. And so I don't think we should legislate making it illegal to transfer those goods, but it does kind of go against the wildlife conservation model to be able to sell and trades an animal product, right?
It'd be interesting. I'm going to put myself out on the limb here. It'd be interesting to know if you or any of your listeners would be interested in having like a shed license to sell. You know, like we have to do that with rocks that you pick up on BLM. You have to do it with mushrooms over a certain poundage. Didn't know if there was any interest in that in the people of Wyoming. So if you are interested, I'd love it if you got a hold of me and just tell me your thoughts, because I'm just trying to get a gauge, because I know a lot of people have floated the idea. I don't know what the general public thinks of it.
I don't know. It's an interesting. I'd never really thought about it, and I'm not opposed one way or another. It's pretty tough to track, right? It's like, that's an unlicensed sale. It's like, I didn't, you know, maybe it's one I harvested legally, not a shed, but
and then you
am
cut
I
it
selling
off.
you? Yeah. So that's an interesting, thought-provoking idea there, Jade.
And just to, like, I fully understand too. There always seems to be I think wherever you're talking, whether it's wildlife management or roadway management, it doesn't really matter. When you start adding more levels of things to police for, it gets really hard to police for them all.
Yes. And I'm of the opinion, if we are going to do this, 100% of it goes to conservation, not back to the general fund. Right.
That's a fair point. The nice thing, and on that note, the nice thing about the game and fish in Wyoming, contrasting to our Oregon example, is old Wyoming did a pretty good job of getting off the general. No, let me back that up. The story is Wyoming went kicking and streaming off of the general fund for the game and fish department. And then now that we're off the general fund, we're like, oh, this is kind of nice.
Yeah, we get to keep our own money and we get to do what we want with it.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, that's just a tangent.
That's fine. That's why we're here. So my next thought was, I don't want to get to the point where like I love to go salmon fishing in Alaska. My dad's got a place there, but the Kasilof River with a drift boat is where I like to fish. However, you need a fishing license. You need a king salmon stamp. You need a trailer registration sticker. You need a boat registration sticker. You need a truck to pull said boat and trailer with a registration sticker. You need a driver's license. And then you need to buy, I like to pull plug cut herring when it's open and legal. So now you got to go buy bait and pay sales tax on top of the bait, and then pay a parking and a launch fee to put your boat in said river, and then pay a removal fee on top of buying the gas to go catch a fish. And that gets me into our PK lure moment of, I never really, my dad's a big fisherman, and the guys that have listened to this podcast know that and know that that's probably why I'm a big hunter. But we got to highlight PK moment in their spot. And PK Lures is a Wyoming started company. They make some great lures for hard water or open water. I don't like that hard water as much. I like my water liquid, and usually I like to be skiing on top of it. But when I do wet a line, I get to go use PKs quite often. And if you hadn't tried one yet, Jaden, they've got some pretty cool lures for pretty much any species of fish. They got some cool lures, and I've been going with the flutterfish with Patrick in certain spots, and we've been hammering fish. So you just cast it out, let her sink for a second, rip it up, crank, rip it up again, let it sink, and it acts like a dying minnow, and the fish can't resist it. So whether it's walleye, trout, bass, definitely that's for me. I've now got my boys into, we've got a lake around here. We are using flutterfish just on our own and just slaying the rainbows. And Wyoming has the Master Angler program, and through Patrick, I've got a couple master anglers now I've put in for and submitted and got them. And my 9-year-old is on the hook. He wants to get his own 20-inch rainbow trout master angler. So we've gone a couple times, and he's caught some 18, 17. And every fish we bring home, we got to measure that one, Dad. We got to measure that one. And we're smoking those trout. And they're not as good as the king salmon, but or the sockeye salmon. But yeah, that gets our trout fix in.
That's awesome, man. I'll have to give some of those lures a shot. I have gotten really into the hard water, especially when, like last year, man, it was so high pressure. There was hardly any ducks down until the very end of season. So we went out in like December, November, and did quite a bit of hard water fishing, and it's pretty fun. And I like it. It helps me get through the winter.
Well, I'm going to give the listeners a carrot because I don't have it in front of me. I'm not as prepared as I should be, but we do have a promo code for PK Lures. So you'll have to go listen to a couple other episodes, and you'll have to go check out another episode. And in there, buried is a PK Lure promo. So get you some % off and get a PK Lure order in. They do have them in at Rocky Mountain Discount Sports as well. So
nice.
Next time you're preparing to go do a little fishing, they got some 1/4 ounce, 1/8 ounce little tiny jigs that work really good in some of the smaller lakes, panfish, but their 1/2 ounce out there in the big water does really good.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I'll swing by there. I'm going through town again. I should be probably going by there tomorrow and Saturday. So,
Fire Tiger or the Red Dot Glow.
Okay, that's hot tip. I like that. Thank you.
So that is the one thing why I brought the fishing up, is some of those fish nuts delve into the world of, whether it's, Zach even with lake trout fishing, or, there's lots of these guys, and I've noticed there is a huge similarity to where it comes down to sportsmen, and 80% of the fish and game are harvested by 20% of the sportsmen, right?
Right.
And it's those guys that uncover every facet and angle and are learning every tip and trick, and they're practicing driving down the road with their bugle tube on their way to work every day, right?
Yep.
They're not listening to the radio, or they're probably not listening to this podcast. They got their reading, and they're learning how to call elk. And that dedication to this sport is what's been so alluring to me, right? I've fly fished, I've spinner fished, I've bait fished, I've rifle hunted, I've bow hunted, short of atlatl. I love trapping. And it's got a bad rap, and people like to turn their nose up at it. But, to go out and place some leg holds and do the work,
yeah,
and find the locations and do it legally and right and get after it. There is something on a cold December morning to get up, start the truck up, grab the kids. I grab my fur hat and we're going to go check traps, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's 3 down at the back of the property, you never know quite what you're going to get, right? It's that feeling of going to check trail cameras.
Yep.
Times 100 because the animal's still there.
I just barely got, I got all my trap tags and set a handful out last winter. And I've been kind of talking with the guys at the Wyoming Trappers Association. Phil here in this local area is a great resource. And, but it started because we have a bunch of chickens, and then the raccoons are getting into our chickens.
And no more chickens.
The head popped off of one, and you're like, we need to remedy this issue. And I was playing defense for the first couple of years, and now I've taken to offense.
I like that. I was playing defense, and that wasn't going so well, so we switched to offense for the raccoons.
That's right. And so I've got this... we rent our house that's on a ranch. And so he's totally cool with me trapping raccoons and coyotes and whatever. And so I had like a 1 mile trap line behind the house down the creek. And I throw my heavy pack on every morning, grab my little 22 and go check the traps. And so I was getting a workout in, checking my traps. And it was just I think I'm going to have to do this every year now because it was a good routine. And like you said, it's just as like Christmas, you walking up D-strap. One of the raccoons, dude, I wish there was a master trapper designation. I think he would have made it for me. He was a honker.
Well, wait till you graduate to Pine Marten, Bobcat, and then wolves.
And that's like the Bobcat game. That is where it's at. I had a couple of
How many bobcats have you seen in the wild?
Dude, I don't think I've seen any. Now that you mention that. I've seen some cougars too. Like I think I'm at 6 or 7 in my life, and I've not seen a bobcat.
I've called 2 bobcats in predator calling.
That's cool.
And I've trapped my fair share of bobcats, but getting to be in personal with bobcats you just don't see them. You see them less than you see mountain lions, and they are sneaky.
That is so cool, man. I think, and also that's one of the few trapping games left where you can cover some of your gas-ish.
You're never going to be profitable trapping bobcats.
No.
My brother and I have a pretty impressive picture of bobcats, but you look at wear and tear, diesel equipment, time. Yeah, we might have put $100 in the bank account, right? With bobcats. Now everything else, and that's where I wanted to get into a little bit, is the sad decline of raccoons, right? And the story and the symbiosis relationship of every species that we've talked about so far. But this one, we used to have a lot of fur coats. Hollywood was fur, right? And
you're saying the sad decline of the market.
Of the market, yeah.
I was like, sir, there is not a decline of raccoons behind my house. I will tell you that.
Here's the unintended consequence, right? Because the only demand is Russia for fur coats.
Right.
And primarily one of the main fur coats is raccoon. Mm-hmm. There's lots of other ones, but coon is a big fur coats, especially in those colder climates where they want a big fluffy coat. So coons were $20-$30 a coon. You could almost cover your gas, right? Coons are now $3-4 a coon. And if you've ever skinned and fleshed and stressed a coon, it's not a 5-minute chore.
No.
Nutria, bam. Muskrats, bam. But coons are a pain, right?
Yeah.
But when the coon market's up to a good clean coon's $40-45, and you can maybe do 2 an hour. I'm slow. I can maybe do 2 an hour, but you can catch a pile of coon. You can skin them pretty quick, but fleshing those suckers is, however, by removing all those coons, I'm a huge proponent of pheasant hunting. I love pheasant hunting. I got a dog that loves pheasant hunting. And if you're out and about after I get done with that October mule deer hunt, I'll be right here on Ocean Lake in this pheasant area. You'll see the old bow spider truck almost every morning because I'll get up, have breakfast, load the dog, right? It doesn't even start till 8, so I leave the house here at 7:35. I go park at a spot. I walk around. By 9:30, if we don't have our 2 birds, I don't care. I load the dog up. I'm back here by 10, and I work till 4 or 5, right? So I get my full work day in, plus I get to go kill pheasants.
Yeah.
But you know what's the hardest thing on pheasant? Coons. They destroy pheasant nests and eat the eggs like crazy, right?
Yeah.
So if the fur market's high and there's guys like you out there vacuuming up a bunch of coons, and you can never get rid of all the coons, I don't care what you say, but then the pheasant numbers increase, right? And it's that predator-prey management relationship we've been talking about this whole podcast. And by the market being completely gutted from $40 high to maybe $4 of high, and that's again kind of breaking our wildlife model conservation of can't sell animals. However, I really am in support of that because it removes the coon, which is kind of the quote unquote trash fish that eats the trophy fish, right?
I've heard this on a different podcast, so I'm not an expert at all, but I heard that this is especially an issue in the kind of southeast Midwest with turkeys. For the exact same reason. Exact
same problem. And guys were, if you can more than cover your gas, because you're not eating coons. And
I actually
I'm not eating a coon, but let's hear it.
Okay, well, I was in the least you got to save the fat for me next year. I ended up waterproofing a bunch of my leather goods, like with leather boots and stuff, with coon fat last year, and
they do have a lot of that. I will say that.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember. I don't think we ate any of the coon fat. We eat our bear fat, put it in pies and stuff, and that's pretty good. But then what we did with ingested, again, I'm not very good at cooking. I do it a lot, but it's usually just hamburgers and tacos.
Yeah, barbecue is my specialty.
There you go.
I stay out of the kitchen.
So Jess, man, she made this slow cooked barbacoa raccoon, and we made tacos out of it. So it was dang good. That was the first one that we'd really gone full bore with. And it was that big fat one that I was just telling you about.
Well, kudos to you. That's a trash panda is not on my list. Maybe I'll open my horizons, and the next time you cook some, I will sample it.
This is not also a town raccoon. Just to clarify, I caught this thing in the Russian olives. It is not. It is a clean one as far as that is concerned. But anyway, that was our experience. And that, like I said, we're just trying to just screw around with it because I think what you're getting at, though, is like there's a lot of stuff going to waste if you're not doing anything with that hide. Oh, I mean, it's just kind of like that just takes all of the interest in.
And guys are not out there chasing them and patrolling them. And so now our management has to adapt because that tool isn't being utilized, and it's not being utilized for holistic reasons, right? It's selfish reasons. If somebody doesn't want to wear fur and doesn't want to be vegan, and I mean, I'm sorry, we're rural Wyoming here, and you said you're on defense and now you're on offense. I'm not going to advocate for the removal of any species 100%.
Right.
But I'm going to advocate to manage all those species based on the biologist's input of, hey, this is our carrying capacity and this is what our quota should be.
Mm-hmm. Well, it goes back to like we go just pretty much from where we were talking at the beginning of this is like we humans have a footprint on or an impact on every part of the ecosystem at this point. The other thing is we always have. You talk about the eastern Shoshone that used to be in this country. They were hunting these critters top and down and having an impact as well.
I've had this same argument of carbon footprint, right? If you go buy a Prius or a Tesla and you're sitting here touting you have a good carbon footprint, right? I would say that power output, my diesel truck that's got almost 300,000 miles on it has a much better carbon footprint than a Tesla ever will. And here's why. That cobalt and the other minerals that they mine to go into those batteries is being mined in China. That's where it is. I'm sorry, but they have the largest deposits. It then gets put on a ship burning coal or diesel to China or to Japan to get refined into plates that then get shipped to Germany to get assembled into batteries that again get shipped back to either the coast of California for Tesla or back to Japan for Toyota to get put into a car to get shipped here to the U.S. so that you can drive around and feel morally superior to me, right? Where my diesel truck getting 20 miles a gallon pulling horses up and down the roadway, right?
It sounds to me, Dave, that we need your horses pulling the truck.
Yeah, at the price of diesel at the moment, this September, I might just actually hitch them. They could pull the truck to the mountain this year.
The front. No. That's funny.
But I can't do the math exactly right, but I'm pretty sure that Tesla or that Toyota Prius is going to have to drive. I mean, that windmill is going to have to spin until it falls apart to equal the amount of carbon that was put into making it. So we're always going to have a carbon footprint. You're never going to be carbon neutral and zero on anything. You have an impact.
And one of the downsides, like let's just say for some reason the light switch flipped and we had just all renewables. All of those solar fields and windmills have to go someplace and take up habitat, wide open space, places for cows to chew on grass.
It gets worse than that. So they have in Vegas, there's a valley just south of Vegas. They were going to put 9 of these mirrored solar turbines in, right? So there's, instead of passive solar, it's active solar where they actually reflect the sun to the central tower. They heat the tower up and it drives a steam turbine. They raised the temperature in that valley something like several degrees centigrade, and they're just vaporizing birds. Any bird that flies through there is getting hit with, 50 or 150 acres of reflected mirrors. Think of a kid with a magnifying glass and an ant. Same thing, right?
Yeah.
And they raised the temperature of the valley so hot. Well, now we're, so that's the solution, long-term solution. I know this is a hunting fishing podcast, but it's hydrogen power, and that's a fact.
And using less overall, which I don't see that changing.
And going back to grass-fed beef, because what we have here before, we had grass-fed bison. Well, I don't think we should go back to bison, because could you imagine that on the roadways? Because bison do not care about fences. They will go through any. I mean, the look at the fences they have to put in to keep the bison in.
Yeah. Side note, I do think that now since roadkill has been legal to pick up, I think there was 2 bison that have been picked up off the roadways. Which means someone had to hit it. So
yeah,
it's not good.
That's an overall net negative for the, we have to replace a pickup now. And yeah, let's put a fence in and keep the bison off the road.
Yeah.
Or let's pull the road up and just not drive there anymore.
I mean, I guess that's a solution. Yeah.
Growing up very close to Eugene, Oregon, I got told more than once that hemp was the saver of the planet, and we just all need to have hemp. And you know what? If you're ready to roll the sidewalks up, turn the electricity off, and go out in nature and pick mushrooms all day, great. But civilized society isn't going to do that, and I'm not going to do that. I like to flip the light switch on and have the lights come on, and I know that's attached to a coal plant somewhere or a natural gas plant, and you know what? I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Well, no, in Oregon, it was a dam. So,
it's killing all the fish, and they're going to rip out.
Yeah.
Don't get me started on Oregon, my friend. We're gonna. So, Jaden, I've loved having you on. We do have to hit our last sponsor, which is a little self-serving, but Bow Spider, thank you. If you don't know what Bow Spider is, I mean, I'm assuming you know what Bow Spider is.
Oh, of course.
So, it's a universal bow packing and storage system that everybody's favorite is the headrest of their truck. That's my favorite because that's where my bow received all its damage. And when I tell customers that in the booth, they always give me kind of a cockeyed glance, like, is this guy facetious right now? Is he being genuine? And no, I really do love having one strapped around the headrest of the truck, but you can utilize one on the wall at home, up your tree stand, no pull rope needed up and down the tree. I don't stand hunt much. I might pick up saddle hunting. We'll see. And I have a dream of killing a bull elk over a wallow in a saddle in the wilderness. That would be cool, but obviously, if you watch our how-to videos, it goes on your backpack, goes on your hip, on your wall at home, on your headrest, on your tree. So check Bow Spider out if you're getting ready to go chase elk in September. One less thing to have to carry is that heavy bow, and it is worth it.
Oh man, Jess has hers all over the place, but she runs that on her pack just like every day in the fall. We're headed in. She's got that thing strapped on her back, and we get into some bugles. It floop. Just like a ninja pulling a sword out of their sheath.
It's you will get to the point, at least I have, if once you get your Bow Spider and you utilize it on the back of the pack like that, where I'll sit down and have a sandwich or rip a bugle, sit in a meadow, and just a 5-minute breather, and then hey, we're gonna bust more country, right? Because I think of elk hunting like a seine net. The more country I can seine through my net, the more critters I'm gonna catch until I come across that one. I kind of run and gun turkey hunt like elk, right? I'm going to cover country till I find a bull that wants to play the game. And when we screw up on him, I don't care. I'm going to cover more country till I find a bull that's going to play the game. And eventually one's going to come in with the wind right, with the collar in the right spot, and he's going to die. So, but there's been a couple times I've got off that, that snack break and walked about 100, 200 yards and been like, oh no, I left my bow. Oh, where's my bow? Kind of do like a little spin around, like check your pockets for your phone or your key. Like, oh no. Oh yeah, it's on my back. Okay, phew. You will do that. I've had a couple customers do it as well. I've done it a half a dozen times. I'm like, did I leave my bow back there 200 yards? And when my brother was hunting with me with the prototype, in the dark, we both just leaned on the side of the trail, sitting there, taking a breather. And there's nowhere to sit down usually. I mean, you're lucky if you find a rock or a stump where I go. So it's just sit on the ground. Well, he leaned back a little too far and just unclipped his bow, and it just quietly landed in the bushes because it didn't even fall. It just kind of rested there, right? Because he was almost laying on the ground. We got up and I went first and he's hiking behind me, and we went like 50 or 100 yards and he switched to hiking in front of me. And in my headlight, we'd gone maybe another 50 or 100 yards. I'm like, hey, I'm trying to look around him. I'm like, why don't you have your bow in your bow spider, man? I just got this set up, just got it on your bow in your pack. Should solve all your problems, right? I'm like, why are you back to carry? I'm like, hey, where's your bow? And he's like, oh. He turns around, goes running back, is laying right there on the side of the trail. So one big piece of advice is if you're riding a horse, a mountain bike, e-bike, dirt bike, four-wheeler, put a second strap down low around that so it can't come out, because I've had several customers, even myself included, a horse went to bucking and the bow was gone. Now, thankfully, a bush caught the bow just at the right angle and I got the horse under control. But yeah, if you just clip that in there and go to try and ride a bronc and buck, it's not going to work out. Or you hit the seat on the four-wheeler, or the luggage rack on the mountain bike pops up, or you just hit a bump just at the right angle hard enough. Yeah, put one more strap around that. You're going to be much happier going in on your week-long hunt where you don't drop your bow and break your sight off.
Oh, that's a good pro tip.
But if you're just hiking around, oh, heck yeah, the thing works great. So, well, Jaden, that's our sponsors. I think we've given people a lot to think about. Thank you for coming. And how can people get a hold of the Federation and get a hold of you?
I really appreciate you having me on too. This has been super fun because I know we've just been chatting and passing for probably a couple years now, and I'm glad that we finally got a chance to sit down. And I really appreciate you having me on. If someone wants to get involved with the Wyoming Wildlife Federation, I will say the best thing to do is to first just follow us on the social medias or get our emails, and you can find that at Wyoming Wildlife on Facebook and Instagram, or at wyomingwildlife.org. to get the rest of the information. That is the best first step, because then you get to find out what things that we're up to, what things that we're doing that you want to support or get involved in. That's really important. And again, you can DM us through there. You'll get a hold of me if you do. The other aspect, if you do want to just, something I said was particularly not related to WWF today, but you wanted to get a hold of me, it's at Jaden Bales on Instagram.
Perfect. Yeah. So any comments, question, concern, if you're infuriated about what David said about sheep hunting in Alaska, Jaden will take the comments, questions, concerns. No, guys, again, we couldn't have this podcast without you, the listeners. How you can help us is wherever you're listening to this right now, share, rate, subscribe, leave a comment. Definitely on top of that, tell your friends, right? Hey, we got this cool podcast. Because whether you've got the hunter, the fisher, the hardcore backpacker, whoever's in your life, if it's just baking bread, if it's charcuterie, if it's smoked salmon, we've got something for you on this podcast, and we want to keep it and we want to grow it. We do have our socials out there. We have Radcast Nation now. So get on there, follow us, subscribe, check it out, and tell your friends. Say, hey, there's this cool new podcast that's, while we are Wyoming based, we're not just for Wyoming residents.
That's right. I appreciate all the episodes you guys have done. You do a ton of good education on here, so keep up the good work.
All right, guys. Until next time, keep listening.
Thanks again for listening to the Radcast Outdoors podcast. We hope that you've enjoyed the show. If so, please go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this podcast and subscribe, share, and give us a 5-star rating, which really helps other people find the show. You can find all of our shows, recipes, giveaways, videos, and much more at radcastoutdoors.com. While you're there, please help support the show by purchasing a Radcast Outdoors shirt or hat. Please don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We also have a Radcast community on Facebook called Radcast Nation, and we'd love for you to join in the conversation there. And of course, please help support our sponsors who make this show possible. Thank you again to PK Lures, Bow Spider, and High Mountain Seasonings. Until next time, get out there and enjoy the outdoors.